Hello and welcome to the Work for Change podcast. My name is Jean, spelled like Jean.
And my name is John with the silent H. Thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us. This is episode 63, and we're really happy for you guys to be here.
Yeah, we got a pretty cool guest that we had interviewed. You want to talk more about it?
So we interviewed I guess you could call him friend. I met him last week at the Under Armour Human Performance Summit, which was really, really fun. But his name is Tyler, and he has an Instagram called functional.foods. So functional.foods. So you guys should go follow him. But he is, like, in his bio, it says, student of naturopathic medicine, wellness enthusiast, human optimization. And he's all about, optimizing your health through food. And the way that I met him, he actually did a kind of like a talk at the Human Performance Summit. And so a lot of the stuff that he had to say I thought was really interesting. So I made sure that I went up and talked to him afterwards and asked if he would be on the podcast. And he was super, super down to do it. But the conversation that we had, I think, was really good. I think that when people are talking about, especially like human optimization and optimizing through foods, a lot of people, myself included, can get kind of... You feel like there's so much information, right? There's the paralysis by analysis. So you feel like there's so much stuff out there. I feel like I'm so far gone. It's just too much. And I really think this conversation will be able to break that down a little bit and let you know, like, you don't have to be perfect from the start. But he is a very, very smart person, much smarter than Jean and I. And I'm really glad that I was able to get someone on here that has all this information to be able to share it with you guys.
Yeah, so be sure to give him a follow on Instagram. Like we said, it's at functional.footy. Footy.
No, it's functional.foods.
Yeah, that's what it is. I don't know what I'm thinking of, man.
I don't know what John's thinking of.
I'm thinking of feet.
Why are you thinking about feet?
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know. I really don't want to know.
No, be sure to give him a follow at functional.foods on Instagram. And, also be sure to tag us at Work for Change Podcasts Foods. And also be sure to follow my own personal page at jean.foodie. We got Obese to Food. We got all of them. So just be sure to follow us all. Let us know what you guys think about this episode. We think you're going to enjoy it. Here is episode 63 with Tyler.
All right. So, Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Me and my brother, we were wondering, because we read kind of a little bit of your background and a little bit of, what you do now with Instagram and stuff like that. And we were kind of curious, like, how did you get into, like, what you're doing now with Instagram and the schooling that you're kind of going into?
Yeah, great question.
Even before that, like, just your journey, like, not even why specifically are you in the field you're in, but just what was the journey like that led you up to where you are,
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of healing by going through that journey and sharing your journey with other people. And so I think that's why I came to Instagram. I was also looking for a community of like-minded people. I was an athlete. I was a swimmer back in college. I swam competitively for 15 years at the Division I level. And I decided my sophomore year of college that I wanted to make a change. I wanted to look at health from a more holistic perspective. I've always believed that food is foundational and it plays an important role in keeping us healthy. But as an athlete, I started to look at how could I make changes to my diet or cater to some of these other areas that I really haven't given a lot of attention to enhance my performance and improve my recovery so that I could excel to a higher level being a collegiate athlete. So it started by reading a book called The China Study, which really promotes a very plant-forward vegan agenda. And it was the first book I read that really opened my eyes that maybe this standard American diet that I was consuming that was really based on factory farm meats, a lot of refined carbohydrates, processed foods, candy. I mean, I was known in college as the person with the best snacks that people would come in my room and eat all the good stuff, the gummy bears and the Cheez-Its and the sour gummy worms, all the stuff. And from a caloric perspective, looking at just like energy density, I mean, my body needed those calories. And so I never really dealt with carrying excessive weight or extra weight as a swimmer. And so I was, I could really eat anything, but I wasn't paying attention to the quality of the food that I was eating. So I had this change in mindset that, by changing that quality that, hopefully I would see improvements in the pool, my ability to recover and my ability to perform. So I went over a period of 6 months from standard American diet to more vegetarian based diet. So I cut out meat and fish. But I was still eating eggs and dairy. And then I made the full switch to go vegan. And so, a very strict plant-based diet. So, I cut out, the eggs. Dairy was the hardest thing for me to cut out, especially cheese. It was so addictive to me.
Yes.
But, I made that transition and, ultimately, I felt really good the first 13 months of that transition. I was seeing improvements in recovery, my performance. I didn't feel as fatigued. And so I really, believe that this was the best diet that anyone could be, choosing for nutritional superiority and athletic performance. And so I really preached that, I embodied that, and I shared this message that, plants, contain phytonutrients, that contain fiber, and they're so foundational. And, some of the longest aged populations in the world have a plant-centered or plant-forward diet. You talk about the blue zones, Dan Buettner's work. So, that's what started this whole journey for me. But ultimately, it was after that 13-month mark that I hit a plateau. And actually, I was really in this deficit. I was overtrained and I could not recover. And so my body was constantly in this catabolic state, meaning that it was constantly breaking down muscle tissue. I could not put on weight. I'd actually lost 12 pounds. And as an elite athlete, I was training over 20 hours a week, both in the pool, weight room, and spin cycling. I really didn't have any weight to lose. And so it got to a point where some of my teammates would say you don't look so good. And a lot of times people glorify weight loss like it's the panacea, like it's the most impressive thing that the human body can do. And for some people, they don't have weight to lose, and it's maybe not a good thing. So you want to be at a healthy weight. And that healthy weight is going to look different for each person. But, assuming that by losing weight, that's a good thing may not actually be a good thing depending on the individual and where they're at in their journey and in their progress. So, for example, too, excessive weight loss within a short amount of period of time too can be a hallmark of cancer as well. So again, something that you don't want to just brush under the rug, and you want to get that checked out, especially if it's unexplained weight loss. So, I had to basically say, hold up, reassess, what am I doing? I had really believed in this message that food is medicine, eating whole, real foods. And I was supplementing at the time because I knew that it was harder to get vitamin D, B12, calcium, zinc, iron, some of these micronutrients that are harder to come by on a plant-based diet. Not that you can't get them. You just have to be very strategic. And, I thought I was pretty, I had a very thorough meal plan in terms of just what I was consuming, but ultimately I had to make some changes. And so I was like, well, I'm not getting the results I'm needing. I can't continue to do the same thing. And so I slowly reintroduced animal-based products, started with eggs, then with fish. I never really introduced dairy. It's not something that really agrees with my body personally. But red meat was the last thing I introduced. And that took about a year to reintroduce. But ultimately through this journey, I kind of ran the gauntlet from a standard American diet, going to a whole food plant-based diet and meticulously supplementing and kind of removing a lot of these refined carbohydrates from my diet, to then incorporating some quality animal products, eggs, fish, and meat, but still kind of creating this foundational approach that it's plant forward or plant centric. So I would say 90% of my diet is still plants. And then that other 10 to 15% is quality animal products. And that's in the form of organ meats, eggs, bone broth, fish. And so, that has allowed me to really thrive and kind of find my balance that works best for me. But, each person's going to be a little bit different. So I decided to come to Instagram, share my story. I actually started as a vegan food account during that time and sharing that, some of these foods that, are your childhood favorites, you can actually recreate and they can be vegan or gluten-free, and more wholesome, nourishing, and simpler ingredients and be just as good for you. And that's how I started. And then ultimately transitioned it into more of these infographics and information to share this information that food is medicine and this important aspect that I truly believe in called bio-individuality. And so what works for one person may not work for you because we are each biochemically individual. And so that's something that, I cannot preach more because, you see certain, influencers or people or public figures out there that are talking about the benefits of X diet, whether that be keto or paleo or a low lectin diet or, vegetarian. But just because it works for them does not mean that it will work for you. But I encourage people to try these things, ultimately, by trying all these things and by myself personally, by trying all these different diets, I have found what works best for me. And I'm able to take these little bits and pieces of the puzzle and put it together to find what is true for me. And I think that's so important. And it ultimately, through this whole experience, catalyzed my journey into pursuing a degree in naturopathic medicine. Naturopathic medicine is it's a 4-year medical school. And it's a distinct branch outside of conventional medicine, your MDs and DOs. But it's 4 years, and it's, your basic trainings and your basic sciences, your anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, immunology, all that good stuff. But the big difference with naturopathic medicine is that you have a much larger toolkit to meet the patient where they're at. So rather than being limited to pharmaceuticals and surgery as a MD or a DO, we also are trained in clinical nutrition, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, and physical medicine, as well as herbal and botanical medicine, and which is a really big tool in our wheelhouse that really just gives us a lot more options to really, cater to the individual and what they're looking for. Some people want to make a big, jump and want to truly heal from like the root cause of that illness. There's other people too, where it maybe isn't feasible, or maybe they're just not in a place where they want to truly heal right now. And, to preserve quality of life, it may be necessary to give them a drug. This is not a anti-pharma type of spiel. But really, I really believe in this medicine. I'm very passionate about this medicine because I feel like it gives us so many tools. It gives people hope, but there are other options out there, and it's taking a different approach, that it's working with the body and disease being a process and a manifestation of imbalances that have gone unchecked in the body over time that have led to this outward expression of symptoms, which we give a disease name and then diagnose the individual. So that is my my long rundown of my career and where I'm at today, and I will be graduating in a year from now.
Awesome. There's so many things. I kept wanting to be like, wait, let me interrupt here. But I was like, let him get through.
That was good.
That was there's just so many things that I want to talk about. So like one of the things that jumped out to me was when you were explaining your journey, I have a similar story, but in a completely different sense. So like for me, when I started losing the weight, I did what I call the common sense diet. So I was eating, again, the typical Western diet. I ate like in excess, and I was not an athlete, so I did gain weight, right? So I would go to like a normal lunch for me would be, I'd go to McDonald's, I'd get 2 McDoubles, 2 McChickens, a large fry, and a large soda. And like soda for me was like my lifeblood, man. Like I would drink a 2 liter a day easily, like every day, probably more than that most days, right? And so for me, when I started losing weight, I told myself, okay, what are the things that, and I had absolutely no background, right? I knew nothing about nutrition, but I was like, what are the things that I know are unhealthy, right? Quotes. What are the things that I know I shouldn't be eating and drinking? Soda was like a big one that it's like, no matter how much you know, people are like, nah, soda probably shouldn't be drinking that all the time, right? So soda, fast food, and junk food. So like when I say junk food, I'm thinking like what you were talking about, the snacks, like the chips, the candy and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. So what I did there was like I cut those things out, and then I saw results. And then another thing you were talking about is how like weight loss isn't always like this. People see it as this great thing, and it's something that I fight all the time because obviously a lot of people follow me because I lost weight, right? And I'm always like, again, the goal isn't to lose as much weight as possible. It's to become healthy. And so that's a whole nother thing that I want to talk about. But like, so I started losing weight, but then eventually it turned into, okay, I'm eating 2,000 calories and I'm losing this amount of weight? What if I eat 1,500 calories? And then what if I eat 1,000 calories? And then eventually I was eating like 700 calories a day. And that's when I started kind of developing binge eating, which at the time I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that for like 3 days I could stick to my diet. In my head, I'm doing really well for 3 days. Yeah. And then the fourth day, it's like, what just happened? I ate 7,000 calories in one sitting. And so like I went from one extreme to another. And like that's kind of what I wanted to talk about was, I think that that's a very common thing with a lot of people that like, because you see these results, at least for me, like I saw these results and I was so excited and inspired by them that I just wanted to keep pushing it. And then eventually it's like the diet that I was eating towards the end was like so far removed and not at all related to what I was eating before. It's so hard for like when people are maybe just starting a journey and they're eating the typical Western diet, they see these people that are like promoting all of these diets to them. They're like, you need to cut everything out and go 100% into this. And I've seen that almost never works, right? It's like if you're trying to go from 0 to 100, it almost never works in my experience. So like someone that, all the things that you do, if you're talking to someone that is like eating whatever they want, they have no regard for what they're eating, and they're like, I want to start being more aware of my nutrition. I want to start being more aware of these things. Like, how would you get that person started?
Yeah, you bring up so many great points. And I think that's an important concept to clarify too. You talked about how it being a journey, and it is a journey. And I think a lot of us, because of the way that we've been exposed in our Western medical model, we believe that there's this, there's a pill for every ill. And like, there's going to be this silver bullet, pill or answer that is going to get me that weight loss quickly. I want to get to that goal quickly. I don't want to invest. I don't want this to be a time intensive process. And so, it has to be sustainable. And what I think is important too is like when you get people to commit, maybe it's 30 days and they start to see results, then that excites them. It entices them to continue to further that journey and to maybe see how can I do a little bit better? How can I improve upon those results? Because if you don't get the benefits, it's like, well, then what am I doing it for? So I think starting small is key because it's kind of like keeping that one small promise to yourself. And then when you like follow through with that and you start to see a little bit of results, then that gives you that little bit more fuel to keep going. And so, I think it's important too to find an accountability partner, find a team, find a community. I mean, you can accomplish so much more together. And I think that's what also, is so impactful with your story too, and inspires so many people is just your approach and your ability to, again, build this community, because it gives people a foundation and a layout of like, this is possible. And that's, if you give your body the different tools that it needs, that you can achieve these goals as well. And so, starting small and think about, you don't have to completely overhaul your diet. Like I wouldn't expect somebody, if they're eating, let's say a standard American diet, to just go to this picture perfect, clean eating health picture. Like that's not going to be sustainable, especially if you don't have the culinary skills and know how to cook on your own. And so maybe it's okay, I'm going to cut out the sugary drinks. I'm going to just cut out the liquid calories. Like that's practical, right? Mm-hmm. You can still eat your fast food. You can still, eat processed food or whatever, just cut out the liquid calories. Maybe that's a Frappuccino in the morning. That can be like a, 500 calorie bomb with 70 grams of sugar. You're cutting out the 2 liters of Coke. And then maybe it's okay, I'm going to make one meal from scratch a day. Maybe that's even too much. Maybe three times a week, I'm going to make one homemade meal. And so it's like, how can I make little improvements compared to where I was before? And remember that this is a long game and it's a journey, and that there's so much beauty in that journey because there's self-discovery along that process too. But that's, I think, the important message is that it's a journey. It's not a quick fix. There's no silver bullet out there. Please, I know that some of these quick detox teas and stuff can help you lose 5 pounds in a week, but you're just going to gain that weight back. And so, there's, but just, it's the sustainability. You don't want to have to obsess over counting calories and macros because you're going to drive yourself insane, but use it as a tool. Use it as a tool to help you dial in your macros and kind of like what kind of foods, are working for you. So you don't go overboard, but also by just focusing on eating whole, real foods, that can be a humongous transition for anybody that is eating an otherwise very processed, highly refined diet that comes from a lot of, packaged, microwavable, toaster oven type meals. And so that would be my message to people How can you incorporate more color? That's typically going to come from fruits and vegetables. It also contains more fiber, and that fiber is going to create bulk, and it's going to make you feel full longer. It's going to stabilize that blood sugar, so you don't feel that urge and need to binge and snack all the time. So those are some of the places that I would start, and just think about small changes. You're in it for the long run, and there is no silver bullet answer.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that, you talked about like biochemical individuality and how each of us we're not cookie cutter.
Uh-huh.
Coming from that realization and that belief, that conviction, does that come from like your 13 months of strict vegan and then starting to realize after that, like, oh, I'm not feeling as great as I thought I would or should or used to? Is that the journey that kind of brought you there? Was that experience of after the 13 months kind of starting to feel more sluggish, more tired? Is that like the impact that had on you, was kind of starting to realize the biochemical individuality?
Yeah, absolutely. And here, I guess this is the place that I was at, and after that 13-month mark, where it had worked so well for me. So then all of a sudden to hit this plateau and actually kind of go backwards really surprised me, and it confused me. It stumped me. Mm-hmm. I studied cell and molecular biology. I understood the science behind it, and so that gave me an edge up. But here's the thing, is that I was so invested in the literature and taking the research to a T that I kind of outsourced my own power to other people in the field and other experts and physicians that were speaking out on the benefits of a plant-based diet or a vegan diet. And I was not listening to my body. And I think if that ability to be self-aware and to be so in tune with your body that you know how it's responding to your environment and the foods that you're consuming, that's like a superpower. I think it's amazing when you have that awareness. And so, I was aware of these things, and I was getting, I was bloated and gassy all the time. I was having, bouts of diarrhea and then constipation and back to diarrhea. I had poor wound healing. I'd get injured and it would not heal. Mm-hmm. I was frequently getting sick. And so it's like right after I had gotten over something, I would get sick another 2 weeks later. And I was getting these recurrent canker sores. And so this wasn't supposed to happen. This was not what I was expecting out of this. And so, couple this with, all of the catabolic nature of the sport that I was doing, was constantly breaking my body down. I knew I needed to make a change. And so it was this transition of like, well, I know this is what the research says, but my body's saying otherwise. My body's not thriving like the research says that it should.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the reality for me, was just like, what, there's something more to this. And I really believe in this balanced approach, and that when you give the body all the tools that it needs and you remove any of those obstacles that are perturbing normal physiological function, you put the body in a position and a seat to heal. And it moves back to that equilibrium and homeostatic set point. That is what we are all seeking when it comes to health. And so, it was that journey, and it really shook some things up for me. And then I started to slowly open my mind to new, ideas and what people were talking about in the space of paleo and some of these other diets that I had just closed my mind on. Someone talked about it and be like, nope, they're wrong. Like, vegan has to be right. I was very agenda driven, and I was like, this has to be the right diet. It's what the research says.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started to open my mind a little bit more and kind of listen to these things, I was able to just kind of take those bits and pieces and be like, this makes sense. Maybe this doesn't make sense. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see how I respond to it.
Yeah.
Because, for one person, I'm just give an example. Eggs are one of the top most common antigenic inflammatory foods. So people can be allergic to them. They can cause inflammation. For some people, it can be, a superfood. It can be super nutrient dense, provide so many micronutrients. But for another person, it can be like one of the worst foods for them. And so again, that comes back to that, individuality and that person and your ability to tolerate that food from, a digestibility perspective, and how your immune system reacts to the protein found in that egg. And then also your genes, and your genes are, constantly reacting to your environment around you. And that's this field of study called epigenetics. And so, having that science background, I was kind of able to piece these different parts together and just gain more clarity. And that's the thing is like, I don't have a dog in the race. And I feel like most people, it's like, I'm either paleo or I'm keto or I'm vegan. It like becomes like your image. And
absolute 100%.
God forbid that, you start to develop health issues and you have to switch off that diet. And I've seen it with so many people in the community where maybe they were vegan or maybe they were, keto they make changes because they made a change, but they built their whole platform and their name around that. And so it's so
scary.
hard to disassociate from that. So, I really just care about delivering information so people can take that information and put it together, how they see best fits them and what can benefit them.
So I do want to talk about like the impact that like Netflix documentaries have had on health. But before we get into that, because you were kind of bringing up that for the average person, they want to feel good, they want to look good, they want to be healthy. Mm-hmm. How can they not experiment, but how can they find out what their like biochemical individuality is for themselves? Like, are there like markers or are there things to look for, or is it just kind of based on, well, this makes me feel like poop and this doesn't? Like, is that
very scientific?
Is that a fair litmus test though? Like just what would you say for the average person who just kind of wants to be healthy? They don't know all the lingo and the word and what's happening in their body. They just want to feel good and work out. Like what's a good way for that person to find out?
No, it's a very great question and very valid. And it's kind of thing I was talking about earlier too, as I think, okay, first foundational, just start with eating whole real food as much as possible. That should make the foundation of your diet. Start moving away from a lot of those hyper palatable processed foods, because we don't really know what all these food additives, emulsifiers, thickeners, agents that we're adding to our food, what that's doing not only to our health, but what it's doing to our gut microbiome and how our immune system is responding to that. And so it's not necessarily the one exposure, it's the accumulation of these different factors that can have an adverse effect on our health. And so the more you can, simple things, just try to focus on eating real food. And then you can start getting into the weeds of what are the foods that are best for me. We do know that there are these 10 most common inflammatory allergenic foods. So typically, if someone were to come in and we're trying to figure out what diet works for them, we kind of put them on an anti-inflammatory diet. This is kind of from like a medical perspective. Typically, it's an elimination diet. An elimination diet will eliminate those 10 foods. You cut them out for a period of about 28 days, so about a month, and then you slowly introduce them one by one. Typically give the person a food diary or food journal, and you're documenting, have there been any changes in energy? Do I still have the skin rash? Do I notice that I have more energy? Do I have more clarity? Is the brain fog gone? Do I feel like I don't have my asthma anymore? And just kind of, picking up on some of these things by removing those from the diet. But then when you start to add them back in, are there any symptoms that arise that maybe weren't there before? Or two, that come roaring back and maybe that being attributed to that food. And so those common foods are eggs, dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, shellfish. Nightshades are not a common one, but it is a food group that some people can be particularly sensitive to. And that's stuff like potatoes and peppers and hot peppers and goji berries. And then refined sugars and alcohol. So those are the ones that you would be eliminating, keeping a diet diary, and then seeing how that's, changes, and then focusing again during that time on eating whole, nourishing, nutrient-dense food with a kind of a plant-forward approach. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the best place to start for anybody. When we talk about anti-inflammatory diet, it's typically removing those foods and incorporating a lot more nutrient density into the plate.
So when you were talking about like the whole elimination diet and then kind of talking about finding out what works for you, that like resonated with me a lot, because like I've been making YouTube videos for years and years now, and one of like the first groups of videos that I did were full day of eating videos, right? Because people would ask me what I ate to lose weight, and when I first started, I didn't really have a big audience, so I was like, I'm just going to show you guys what I'm eating, and like if you want to eat the same thing as me, that's great. So as I've progressed through the years, I've realized that like what I'm eating doesn't matter to you. Like you shouldn't try and copy what I'm eating. So I struggle with, because a lot of people are like, man, we miss when you made those videos, because they seem to like them. But like I struggle internally with feeling like what I'm eating isn't going to be beneficial for someone especially someone that might be trying to lose 150 pounds right now. Like right now I'm eating like 4,000 calories a day because I'm training like twice a day, right? So my diet is so vastly different than it was when I was trying to lose weight. Like it's changed so much. So I always try and be very aware of my following and like what people are perceiving as far as what I'm putting out there, right? Because I'm almost to a point where I think some people are like, dude, like we get it, you're worried about it, but it's a really big worry for me because I understand that people see what I've done and they see the success or whatever you want to call it that I've had, and they think if I just copy exactly what he's done, I will have success. And I really don't think that is the way that things should go. And one thing that I get slightly bothered by about other accounts, you know, not naming names, is like people, they don't seem to understand that concept of like the people that are following you don't have the same knowledge as you do. So like it's very important to explain it to the lowest common denominator, like make it as easy for someone to understand. So like if I ever do a video where I'm showing what I eat, I say it like a million times, do not eat exactly what I'm eating. This is not, you should eat this video. This is what I'm eating. And if you see some things maybe you might want to try, that's fine. But it's like, do not base your diet off of this diet that I have. And so like the question that comes from that is like, do you feel the same way? Like, are you ever like, you know, writing a caption out on Instagram or like making something and then take a step back and you're like, wait, because like I get definitely too in the weeds with what I do, and I just start thinking, oh, people know about calories and they know about macros and they know all this stuff, and then I might post something and then someone asks a question and I'm like, oh, I missed the mark, like because I'm like starting at 7 and they're at 1. You know, like, do you ever struggle with that, or like have you do you like, you know, move through that at all?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, just to piggyback off something that you were talking about too, there's no food inherently that is going to aid in weight loss. So there's like no miracle food for weight loss. And if it does, I mean, the only thing that came to mind was like protein being thermogenic. And so it's going to, require, it's going to kind of create more of this burn effect metabolically, and where you're going to utilize that energy more efficiently. And so it could lead to a net loss and in terms of calories. But moving away from that whole discussion of, you know, the calories in and calories out, again, I talked about it can be used as a tool, but can we in 2020 and moving forward, can we change the conversation away from losing weight and how to cultivate health? Because when you cultivate health and when you implement practices on a daily basis to implement health, like the body is naturally going to transition and equilibrate back to this ideal body weight. And I think also, like in this day and age, being in the medical field too, and, you know, and diagnosing people clinically as obese, I am very well aware of the stigma around big bodies, and that, you know, just because someone is overweight or they carry excess weight does not anoint them ill health. You can have a 6-pack, you can be super lean and have horrible metabolic health, where somebody could be carrying excess weight and actually have better metabolic health than that person that is super lean. So we can't take someone's weight for face value in terms of that person's health. So talking about too, what you're saying too, I see it as a blueprint. And so maybe this isn't exactly what you should be doing, but here's a blueprint to get you inspired to start on your journey. Because I think so many people are paralyzed. They don't even start because it seems overwhelming.
So much information out there.
But when you've assimilated all this information, you took the leap, and then you've been able to get these results, it's inspiring to people, and it lays down a path for them to then follow. And maybe, you know, they don't follow it to a T, but at least it gives them a place to get started so they don't feel like they're hopeless and they don't know what to do. I'd also say on top of that, you know, I think it's that continuous inspiration and creating that community, that maybe there's a day where they don't really feel like doing the workout, or maybe they don't really feel like, you know, continuing with whatever this changes in their diet, and they want to just revert back to that comfort food. And so maybe checking in on that story, your message and what you're sharing really, reminds that person, like, I got to stay strong. I got to stay with it. Like, I'm right on that cusp of really breaking through. And I'm going to stick with it. And so I think there's so much to that community aspect that I think is so overlooked. But I do have people ask me all the time, show me what you eat, and I'll show people. And I used to do like what I eat in a day. And like, I'm going to probably do a YouTube video in the future doing that. But, there's these nuances for it. But again, I think it's a blueprint for people. You got to figure out what works for you. But what you're going to find common denominator across anything that I share is like 98% of my diet is coming from whole foods that you're going to find in kind of the periphery of the shopping aisles. And like that last 2 to 3% is coming in some type of a packaged processed food. And so, that has been my secret. And really when you're just focusing on nutrient density, you're giving your body all those different cofactors so that it knows what to do. It's going to lose that weight and it's going to put it in this position to heal. So
let's talk about it. Netflix.
I don't know what it is, but okay.
The Netflix documentaries. How, when a documentary comes out, and gets a lot of attention,
I deal with this too. So.
Yeah. How does that affect you, if it does at all? And what do you do? Like, do you have a method in which you try to, not correct, but just express like all right, maybe you saw this documentary, whatever, like Game Changers or whatever all of them are. Do you have like here are some things maybe to think more about, or like do you have okay, I need to look at this, I need to see what they're saying, and here's my response, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, you have the most recent one, Game Changers. There was What the Health, Cowspiracy, Earthlings. So many, yes. Yeah. I mean, that's all very vegan driven. And then you have like the Magic Pill, which is based on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. I mean, these are made for, they're documentaries, so it's kind of like made for TV. So, there is some truth to all of these. I'm not going to discredit that. Is some of the data manipulated? Yes. If you actually were to go through and look at the research studies that they were citing, they may not be telling the full story. They're just giving you a little bit of it. And then you go and look at the discussion, or you actually look at the results, they're not telling you the full story. Regardless, with all of these, I encourage people to stay open-minded to these things, because I think we get so dogmatic around these things. And it's like, there's no truth to a carnivore diet. There's no truth to a keto diet. There's no truth to a vegan diet. And so, we just get in these like camps, and then it's just like we bicker and we fight. And I think that it's silly. And, I think that what we can all get around, if you think about a common denominator among many of these diets, is they are all centered around eating whole foods. And a lot of them are cutting out a lot of those processed grains and a lot of those processed food products. They also are incorporating typically more phytochemicals and more plants. And so how much is going to vary with the exception of carnivore. And here's the thing. I think keto is a tool, and it has medical benefits, especially for those with epilepsy and seizure. And, it can be that jump start for weight loss, because a lot of people, I think, utilize it for weight loss, but it's also going to improve a lot of those lipid parameters. It's also going to improve blood sugar. And help lower that insulin that is going to be more fat promoting in terms of storing away that excess sugar and triglycerides, which is stored fat. But being open-minded, maybe trying it, because that's the whole thing that I really want people to get this message, that I learned what worked for me by trying all these things, figuring out that didn't work for me. Or maybe I kind of just like, it worked really well, but I kind of just take these little bits and pieces and be like, this is what works for me. But I think we're waiting for that one person tell me that like this is the right diet for everyone, and then that's what we're going to do. And we kind of just don't even want to put ourselves out there or to try, because we're afraid to fail, to change habits and routines that we're just accustomed to. And so that is where I whenever I see these documentaries, is like, great. Some of it isn't necessarily true. I can speak from personal experience for this, and I'm sure other people can speak from it too, that just because it works for someone else doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. But with that, I'm not going to just poo-poo it and just say, don't even try it. Try it for yourself. Yeah. You may feel amazing. You may feel, and then you continue to do it and you feel great for 6 months or a year. And then all of a sudden you hit a plateau and it didn't work the same way that it used to. Or, you may try it and you feel awful. And so maybe that's not for you, but you don't know until you try it. You're just taking someone's word for it. And so again, I think just, what are the common denominators? Getting around wholesome foods and cutting out a lot of those processed foods. And I always ask that too. And I've talked to my audience about this in particular, is that when you see research studies showing the benefits of a keto diet or a vegan diet or a paleo diet, what was the diet that the person was eating before to then get the benefits? Were they on a standard American diet and drinking OJ, soda, Starbucks, all those processed refined carbohydrates and pizza, and then they go to a whole foods diet rather that be plant exclusive or paleo or keto? Of course you're going to get benefit because anything is better than the standard American diet. And so that is where I hope I can share that message with people. It's just focus on eating real foods. And then you can start getting in the weeds and figuring out what is true for me, kind of like the elimination diet, making sure that you try to listen to your body. And I think time restricted eating can be a really powerful tool too. I know we didn't talk about or haven't talked about the timing of which we eat, but restricting that window of when we're eating in terms of when we're most insulin sensitive and we're most metabolically robust, so we can better utilize those nutrients during the day and give ourselves a break during the night.
Yeah. The whole thing that you were talking about with you getting in camps with these certain diets. The one thing that I've always said on my channel is remember your diet, people turn their diet into a religion almost. They feel like it's who they are. And I understand why some people feel that way, because for a lot of people, and my background is with massive weight loss, so a lot of the stuff that I see is with that. There are a lot of people that have gone, vegan. That's a little bit less as far as weight loss. There's not as many people that talk about it for weight loss, but with keto and carnivore and paleo and a lot of these diets, people literally changed their life because they went on this diet, and so they feel very attached to it, and that's all great. Again, but I think the thing that's important is, remember, you were eating all of this garbage before and you switched it. So it's of course you lost weight and you feel better because you're not eating McDonald's every day. And I think that it's really important, especially when these documentaries come out, because one thing that I always try and tell people is remember, the people that made this documentary have an agenda. It might not be, when you hear agenda, you think it's this bad thing, but it's they obviously want you to like veganism or want you to like keto. That's why they're making this whole movie, right? So it's take everything with a grain of salt. And I love when these documentaries come out because it's interesting to me. I love watching them, but I know when they come out, I'm going to get a lot of questions. And from the recent ones, I've been getting a ton of questions. And I think it's what you said earlier. It's up to you. If you just trust what this documentary says, you're taking all the power out of your hands. You're putting it in other people's hands. And when it comes to weight loss and when it comes to fitness and stuff, the biggest superpower you can have is knowledge. Going and doing the research. The stuff is out there. You can find it. If you really want to find out about these, even the the studies they'll use in the movie that they have to link or whatever, put it somewhere, you can go and find that study and read it for yourself. Now, it's kind of hard to read if you don't know how to read those things, but all of the stuff is out there for you to find for yourself. So it's don't just watch the movie and be okay, everything they said is 100% true and now I'm going to become vegan or keto or whatever. It's watch the movie, be entertained or whatever, and maybe take a couple things from it. But it's you can't just 100% believe everything they say and be all right, that's what's going to work for me. Yeah,
totally agree. I mean, you got to take it. I always, be a skeptic. And so, your health is the most important, thing in your entire life. Nothing else matters if you don't have your health. So it is worth investing the time and energy to look into these different avenues, do your own research, find people that are knowledgeable in those areas, follow their work. Maybe if you don't have that scientific background where you can necessarily interpret some of that data. But yeah, it's kind of in your ballpark. And I see it as encouragements to, one, eat more whole foods, two, to incorporate more plant diversity and plant matter because of all the benefits it has to our gut microbiome, and our gut microbiome being so intimately linked to our overall health and wellness. And so, those are just takeaways that I could, from any of the documentaries. And here's the thing too, is there's a right way and a wrong way, supposedly, to each of these diets. You could be vegan and eat, hippie chips, these soy chicken nuggets, French fries, and a soda. Or you can have a nourishing bowl of like sprouted, brown rice and quinoa with Brussels sprouts and, sprouted garbanzo beans and tahini and hemp seeds, all this good stuff. As well as like keto, it could literally be bacon and butter, or it could be some some eggs, and you have some cabbage and some kale and some mushrooms that are very low carbohydrate. The net carbs end up being like 2 or 3 grams. And then maybe you have some blueberries, which are also very low carbohydrate, but therefore you're still getting all these phytochemicals, you're still getting fiber, but you're still falling within those macro ratios. And so, that's my point is like, pizza, cheese pizza and soda is vegetarian. And so it's also important to look at the research too, to see what are they feeding this person. Like there was a study in particular that I remember that came out last year, and there was a doctor that is vegan. She promotes a plant-based agenda. And she was calling out this, showing like here, the keto diet showed adverse effects on this person's health, on the study population. And so I actually looked at like, what were they feeding? Look at the methods. What are they feeding these people on a ketogenic diet? They were like canola oil cakes. They were on all these industrialized vegetable oils. It was like what they were giving them. It was butter, and it was like meat capsules. And it was just like, that's not
meat capsule
food. Like it's just like, they're trying to standardize it. And so I was just like this, like, of course that's not going to be good. Like that's all inflammatory. Any industrialized vegetable oils is not going to be beneficial to your health. At least in a high context of trying to hit a macro ratio of 70 to 80% fat. And it's devoid of a lot of fiber and a lot of the whole foods that come as a package. Food is a package. It works in synergy. It has that fiber, those phytochemicals, and all these different nutrients and micronutrients that go along with the macros and those calories. And so when we try to isolate things and just take the one-off component, we're doing ourselves a disservice because we're not getting all that food the way that Mother Nature, intended us to consume it.
Awesome. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and this is kind of a sidestep, but I think it could be interesting, and I'm honestly curious about like what your opinion is. So we haven't really talked much about supplements, and I'm assuming that you probably believe that each person is individual, right? So whatever supplement they might need is going to be dependent on that person. But are there any things that you've seen that maybe a good majority of people like might be a good idea to look into, or like maybe avoid? Like what things you would be like, it's not even worth wasting your money? Just because like one of the questions I get tons about is supplements, and I have my own opinions, but I'm very curious about like what you think and your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common question I get, and being in the functional medicine and naturopathic world, we do utilize supplements and nutraceuticals frequently for therapeutic benefits for patients, especially for those that maybe have impaired digestive fire, and so they can't actually break down and absorb food and actually utilize those nutrients, or maybe they have celiac or some type of impairment where they can't even absorb nutrients in general. So they require sublingual, where it's kind of like absorbed underneath the tongue and it bypasses the liver metabolism. And so you got to, cater to the individual. Unfortunately, our food, the quality of our food in terms of the micronutrients that are found in those foods is so depleted compared to 50 years ago because of our farming practices, unfortunately. So if it's not in the soil, it's not in our food, and a lot of those minerals coming from our food. So a lot of our food is very depleted. So I really do believe in that message is food is medicine, but oftentimes we need to take that step further and make sure that we are supplementing. But I'd also, challenge people. It's like, we learn about the recommended daily amount, the RDA, where it's like, you just need this amount. And like, typically that's based on preventing deficiencies. So like for vitamin C, preventing scurvy, or in vitamin D, preventing rickets. Well, it's like, we don't want those severe diseases, but we want optimal health, right?
Yeah.
And so we need more than that. But also the question to ask is, how is my body utilizing it? Mm-hmm. If you're very stressed, like let's say you're an athlete, you're also a college student, you're working part-time, you just got a lot on your plate, you're going to be stressed. And so you're going to be in this more fight or flight response. Vitamin C is a cofactor that is utilized by your adrenal glands. And therefore, when you're really stressed, your body's going to churn through a lot more of that vitamin C. Same with B12 and your B vitamin. So it could be, the recommendation to make sure that you're getting 500 to 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. But for, context, if you're really stressed, you're going to need a lot more of it because you're going to be churning through it a lot more. So that's one aspect. There are certain nutrients that I think are beneficial for just creating foundational support for people. But also, I think a lot of supplementation does need to be individualized and targeted to what are your specific needs and what are your goals. Are you trying to heal? So are you in a healing stage, or are you in an optimization stage where you aren't trying to heal from some type of chronic illness and you're just trying to optimize your overall health and wellness? So that's another thing to consider. Mm-hmm. When it comes to certain supplements that I kind of take daily, just as foundational support that I think are beneficial, these are things like vitamin D. Not enough of us get outside in the sun. And so that's our best way of making vitamin D, is when it's exposed to our skin. It goes through the liver, it goes through the kidney, and it goes through these different reactions, and we make vitamin D. Vitamin D3 is more of the active form. And so I encourage vitamin D3 as opposed to D2, and coupling that with like a vitamin K. And there are brands now that do a vitamin D3 K2 combo. That can be more beneficial so that you're actually absorbing and utilizing that vitamin D and you don't get calcium deposition in the arteries. Magnesium is another really big one. And the last time I had looked at the statistics, it was about 2/3 of the population, and at least in the United States, are deficient or have subclinical deficiency in magnesium. And that's for multiple factors. When you drink alcohol, that depletes magnesium. Our municipal water supply removes a lot of the magnesium, so we're not getting it from our water because of the way that we treat it in terms of the tap water. It's, again, our food is more nutrient devoid now because it's not in the soil, it's not in our food. We're not eating magnesium rich foods, and a lot of pharmaceutical drugs too also deplete these vitamins and or minerals in the body. So these drugs that we take, even if they're beneficial to help modulate that disease process, they do still act in a certain way where they can deplete vitamins and minerals, or they can alter the gut microbiome in a negative way. So, nothing's benign, I will say that. So magnesium, anyway, super important. It's involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. Wow. And it's kind of is very calming, can be kind of used in anxiolytic. It's great for those that feel more constipated. The type matters in terms of it's context dependent, but magnesium, very important. Prebiotics and probiotics. I mean, you probably have seen it marketed to health conscious consumers. Prebiotics being fuel or food for your gut bugs, your bacteria in your colon. And so prebiotics are fermentable fibers. They're a non-digestible carbohydrate. And this is stuff that you would find in plant foods. You can only find fiber in plants. So that's stuff like chicory roots and Jerusalem artichoke, as well as cooked potatoes and apples, amongst other things. Probiotics are going to be live organisms. So people will take a probiotic, and these are beneficial because they have transient immunomodulatory benefits where it helps support not only the gut, but the immune system too. It bolsters the immune system. So you'll see people taking prebiotics and probiotics. I think they can be very helpful and just help strengthen the integrity of the immune system in the gut in general. The last one I think is omega-3s is a pretty common one that is kind of foundational. A lot of people get that from fish oil. There's different forms. There's phospholipid bound, there's triglyceride bound, and ethyl esters. You have to be careful about the source because those oils can rancify, and by consuming those rancified oils can cause more oxidation and therefore inflammation in the body. Wow. So there's all these different nuances. And so it makes it really confusing for the consumer because you feel like, you aren't equipped with the knowledge to be able to make those informed decisions in terms of what I need. So then it kind of comes in the ballpark of the physician and having, patient educated or patient-centered care to figure out what is best for you, because maybe somebody has a bogged down liver. They've consumed a lot of, high fructose corn syrup in their life from a lot of these processed foods. They've been exposed to a lot of these environmental factors that has clogged the liver up. And so they need certain nutrients that kind of have an affinity for the liver to kind of help move and expel those toxins so that you can properly excrete them out of the body. So it's very nuanced. It's very individualized to the person, but I would say those top four would be fish oil. You can also, if you are vegan, you can get it from an algal DHA. It's a long chain omega-3, but algae oil. If you are vegan, and then the probiotics and prebiotics, best to get from whole foods, but people also add that to supplements, magnesium and vitamin D.
Awesome, man.
Yeah,
that's great. Like,
hopefully that was helpful.
Jean was writing everything down.
I'm
He was
writing
getting all the
down,
notes down. He's like, all right, let me
I'm gonna
add
be
this.
I'm gonna be the healthiest person out there. You don't
There
even
you
know.
go.
Yeah. Cool. So for people who are interested in knowing more, learning more about you, and following you, what's the best way for people to kind of get in contact with you, or at least following you?
Yeah, I spend most of my time on Instagram. They can find me at functional.foods. I post probably 6 days a week, so I'm very active on there, share a lot of my stories. I'm getting my YouTube channel up and running this year. That's a big project for me, and doing more video content. I'm also on Facebook. It's similar content, eat.functionalfoods. And I have a website under construction, but it's tylerjean.com. Yeah, I mean, Instagram is where a lot of people find me and interact with my work. So that's probably the best place.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
It was fun.
So, and I'm so glad we were able to connect last week.
Yeah, I know that was a really fun time. Like I was really glad that I don't even know the fact that I was there. I was like, I don't even know how I wound up here, but like things like that, I always forget like how powerful, like just meeting people and connecting and like doing the whole like, talking to it's just such a big part of it, and I always like forget about it until I'm there. I'm like, oh, look at all these people that are similar, have similar interests to me. So it was really, really cool.
Yeah, it was great to be there. Very inspiring, and hope to connect again soon in the future.
Yeah, for sure, man.
All right.
Peace out,
Thank
dude.
you.
See ya.
Bye.